My name is Sylvia Carter. I am 72 years old, a widow, and for most of my life, a nurse who knew how to mend the visible wounds of others. But nothing in my years of caring for the sick prepared me for the words that would tear through me the night before my son's wedding. I was standing behind her as she tried on her gown, the lace spilling across the bedroom like a promise of purity. My daughter-in-law, Elena, leaned close enough for her perfume to choke me and whispered into my ear, "The best wedding gift would be if you vanish from our family." She smiled as if she had offered a toast, then turned back to the mirror, smoothing the bodice with delicate hands that had never scrubbed a floor or held a trembling patient through the night. My son, David, stood nearby. He did not protest. He did not defend me. His eyes slid away as though I were already gone. In that instant, I touched the silver ring on my finger. Harold's ring. The man who had promised me 45 years ago that I would never be made to feel small. Yet here I was, standing in a house my sacrifice had built, told to vanish as though I were an intruder. One day before the wedding, my daughter-in-law whispered those words. By the next morning, their $3.5 million villa would be on the market, their dream wedding canceled. And what I left behind in that empty house would make them tremble. Before I tell you how it happened, let me pause for a moment. If you are listening now, take a second to like this story, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss what comes next. Your support tells me that my voice matters, that women like me are not invisible. Now, let me take you back into that room. The veil shimmered in the lamplight. She lifted it high as if she were a queen. I stood frozen, my breath tight, my pulse thudding against the inside of my throat. My son's silence pressed heavier than Elena's cruelty. He looked at the floor, his hands shoved into his pockets like a boy caught between two scolding parents. "Say something, David," I whispered, though my lips hardly moved. "This is supposed to be our special weekend, Mom," he said finally. His voice carried no warmth. "Please don't make it harder than it already is." My own son, the boy whose fevers I had nursed through endless nights, now telling me that my presence ruined his joy. I swallowed against the sharpness rising in my chest. My nursing hands had once steadied soldiers and mothers in pain, but here, in front of my own blood, I felt like a fragile shadow. Elena's eyes flickered toward me in the mirror. "Don't take it personally," she said lightly, almost as if she were joking. "We just want a wedding free from negativity." Negativity. That was the name she gave me after I had poured my life into theirs. I felt Harold's ring dig into the palm of my hand. The silver band had dulled with age, but its weight reminded me of vows once spoken. "Never let them treat you small." His voice echoed in my memory, steadier than my own trembling breath. I answered her in a tone so calm it startled even me. "Where, exactly, am I supposed to go?" Elena shrugged, inspecting her painted nails as if the question were trivial. "A hotel? Maybe visit one of your sisters." "Honestly, Sylvia, anywhere but here." Her dismissal hung in the air like smoke. David cleared his throat, uneasy. "It's more Elena's house now. She's been handling the finances. You just helped us once." That single word burned. My entire savings, $350,000 from the sale of the red brick house Harold and I had built, reduced to once. I looked around at the villa's marble counters, the hand-carved staircase, the garden blooming beyond the window. All of it carried my fingerprints, my sacrifices. Yet to them, I was nothing more than a burden to be erased from the photographs of their perfect weekend. Something inside me shifted then. Not broke, but shifted, like a lock clicking into place. I did not cry. I did not beg. I simply whispered, You will have your gift. Neither of them noticed the quiet promise in my voice. Neither of them knew that by dawn, the balance of power in this family would tilt forever. When Elena dismissed my sacrifice as just some money once, her words dragged me back to the day I locked the red brick house in Norfolk for the last time. That house had been my home with Harold for over 40 years. Every window frame had his fingerprints. Every creaking stair carried the echo of his boots. We had planted a maple tree in the front yard the year David was born, and by the time I sold the house, its branches stretched wide enough to shade half the street. The day of the sale, I walked through every room in silence. I ran my fingers along the chipped banister Harold once sanded, and I pressed my palm against the kitchen wall, where our grandchildren's heights had been marked in pencil. I paused in the small bedroom we had kept ready for David's visits, though after he met Elena, he came less and less. My eyes burned, but I told myself I was doing something noble. Harold used to tell me, "We built roots here, Syl. Don't let anyone uproot you." Yet when David said he needed help, I convinced myself that uprooting was an act of love. The house sold for $350,000, nearly every dollar of my savings. Every ounce of Harold's sweat turned into numbers on a check. I handed it to David and Elena with hands that trembled, but with a smile I forced. "This is your down payment," I said. "A home should start with stability." They promised me I would always have a room there, always a place at their table. I believed them. Now, standing inside the villa, I looked at the granite counters chosen from my savings. I remembered signing the check that paid for the custom cabinetry. I remembered approving the curtain rods, the plumbing fixtures, the hardwood floors. I had walked these halls before there were walls, when only the foundation was laid. I had imagined Harold standing beside me, proud that we had secured something lasting for our only child. But in Elena's mouth, all that became some money once. I thought of the red brick house again. It had not been grand. The kitchen was small, and the upstairs bathroom never quite lost the draft that seeped through the window frame. But it was steady. It was ours. When Harold's heart weakened, I carried him up and down those stairs, my arm braced around his frail shoulders, never once thinking of the strain. That house had held his last breath, soft and warm against my cheek. Trading it for this villa had felt like trading memory for marble, roots for glass. And tonight, Elena wanted me to believe it was all nothing. I walked slowly from room to room, touching what my sacrifice had built. The dining room chandelier, glittering above a table where I was never truly welcome. The garden terrace, where Elena hosted friends who never asked my name. The guest room upstairs, never my room, always called the guest room, as if I were a stranger passing through. It struck me then that I had laid the foundation, not just in money, but in silence. Each time I swallowed an insult, each time I accepted being left out of a photograph, I was pouring another measure of myself into their perfect picture. And now, they had no memory of what it had cost me. I paused by the mantel, where a framed picture of David and Elena smiled back. There were no photographs of Harold, none of me. My presence had been carefully erased, even in a house built on my loss. I whispered to Harold's ring. I gave them the foundation, and they built walls high enough to shut me out. As the evening deepened, I realized that what I had given them was not only a house, but permission to forget me. And standing there, listening to their laughter in another room, I knew something had shifted. The roots Harold and I once planted in Norfolk had been pulled up, and in their place was a villa that would never truly be mine. But perhaps, I thought, it could also be my weapon. I used to tell myself that the sharp edges would smooth out with time, that new marriages test old loyalties, and mothers should not compete with brides. The truth is that the warning signs arrived long before the whisper. They arrived as small cuts I learned to ignore, the way a nurse ignores her own aching feet after 12 hours on the ward. On our 40th anniversary, I set the table for 3. Harold was already gone, but I kept his photo at the head of the table as if he might still say grace. David called an hour before dinner and said Elena had surprised him with reservations downtown. I ate a slice of pie, then wrapped the rest for a son who never came. I touched Harold's ring and told him I understood. Love moves forward, even when it forgets to look back. When David and Elena first showed me the model brochure for the villa, Elena laughed at my suggestion that we choose durable fixtures. "We are not building a hospital room," she said. The joke was light, but the message was clear. My life belonged to fluorescent lights and antiseptic soap, theirs to chandeliers and imported tile. I wrote the deposit anyway and told myself I was sponsoring joy. The first time I slept there, Elena paraded friends through the hallway while I was unpacking. "This is the guest room," she sang, smiling at me as if I should applaud the label. Later, she posted photographs of the remodel with a caption that read, "Our home, our dream, our sweat." My name was not tagged. When I asked if she might include one picture of Harold on the mantle, she said modern decor worked best without clutter. There were jokes about my frugal habits. I saved receipts, I mended shirts, I rinsed and reused jars. Elena called it a nurse's budget and laughed behind a wine glass. When my chipped porcelain teacup sat on the counter, David suggested I keep it in my room so it would not ruin the aesthetic. I held that cup like a relic from my mother, a lesson in holding heat without dropping what matters. Holidays changed. I offered to make Harold's pumpkins for Thanksgiving. Elena had a caterer. I brought a pie anyway and watched it sit untouched at the edge of a marble buffet, a silent memory among strangers. After dinner, David walked me to the driveway and asked whether I might cover the new HOA fee until they settled in. He looked relieved when I said yes, as if the world still made sense. I saw another sign the week they installed the custom drapes. Elena waved an invoice in front of David and said, "See, it is handled." She had used my card without asking. When I raised an eyebrow, she kissed my cheek and thanked me for being generous. I swallowed the comment rising to my tongue and told myself that generosity, once given, should not demand applause. There were smaller cuts that still bled. David started referring to decisions as we, and whenever I asked a question, he said, "Let Elena explain." She explained everything, including my role, warm when needed, quiet when not. When I gifted them a framed picture of Harold holding newborn David, the glass never left the box. Elena said she meant to find the right frame for their style. Months passed. I am not naive. Love makes compromises, and aging requires dignity. I chose silence because I believed it protected what was left of my family. I told myself that Elena's sharpness was youth, not cruelty. That David's distance was stress, not abandonment. My nursing hands had taught me to wait for inflammation to subside before I changed a dressing. I waited. The night before the wedding, waiting ended. The whisper did not open a wound. It revealed one that had been festering beneath polite smiles and monogrammed hand towels. I pressed Harold's ring into my palm and felt its circle steady my breath. The signs had been there all along. I was finally willing to read them. The next step would require more than patience. It would require a plan. I sat in my car that night with the engine off, the villa glowing behind me like a stage where I no longer belonged. The house looked beautiful in the darkness, its windows lit by chandeliers that had my fingerprints hidden in every dollar spent. Inside, they toasted to their future, glasses raised, oblivious to the fact that they had just erased me from theirs. I held Harold's silver ring tight in my palm, pressing it so hard the imprint lingered in my skin. His voice echoed from an old voicemail I had saved for years, the last one he left before the hospital stay that ended everything. Remember, Sil, never let them treat you small. I played it again, listening to the rasp of his breath, the steadiness of his tone. Tears blurred my sight, but when I wiped them away, they left something harder, something sharper than grief. They had asked for a gift. I would give them one. It just would not be wrapped the way they expected. I scrolled through my phone and found the number I had stored under Marjorie Lee, attorney. She had been my lifeline since Harold's death, meticulous and firm, the kind of woman who never let emotion muddy a contract. I whispered a prayer she would answer on a Saturday night. "Dorothy, is everything all right?" she asked. She still called me Dorothy, my full name, a reminder that formality meant protection. "I need you to pull every document tied to the villa," I said. My voice was steady, though my heart was pounding. "The purchase, the deed, all of it, and prepare a notice of intent to sell." There was silence, then the rustle of papers. "Sylvia, are you telling me you want to sell your share?" "Yes. They told me to disappear." "Fine. But I am not disappearing empty-handed." Another pause. "You own 30%, legally documented. If they cannot buy you out, the house goes on the market. Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked at the villa again, remembering Elena's words, David's silence. I have never been more sure. When I hung up, my hands shook, but not from fear, from relief. For the first time in years, I was no longer waiting for scraps of kindness. I was taking control. The next call was harder, but necessary. Sunset Gardens Country Club answered on the second ring. A young woman chirped, "Good evening, this is Jessica at the catering desk. How can I help you?" "This is Sylvia Carter," I said. "I need to cancel tomorrow's wedding reception." 240 guests. She stammered. "Cancel?" "Ma'am, the food has already been prepared, the staff scheduled." "I understand. I signed the contract. I put down the deposit, and I am prepared to pay the cancellation fees. But surely you should speak with the bride and groom first." "No," I said, watching Elena twirl in her veil through the lit window, oblivious. The bride and groom made it clear my presence was unwanted. I am simply honoring their request. There was shuffling, the sound of papers being pulled. "Yes, it's under your name. Your credit card information. I'll need confirmation." "You have it. Cancel everything," her voice faltered. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I have ever been." I ended the call before she could object again. My chest rose with something I had not felt in years. Not guilt, not fear, satisfaction. By the time the clock struck midnight, I was checking into the Hampton Inn across town with a single suitcase. The desk clerk asked if I was in town for a wedding. I almost laughed. "No," I said. "Not anymore." In the quiet of the hotel room, I unpacked what little I had taken. A folded nightgown, a worn photograph of Harold, my chipped porcelain teacup, wrapped carefully in a scarf. I set it on the desk and poured hot water from the kettle. The crack along its rim looked deeper under the harsh light, yet it held steady. It always did. I whispered to Harold's ring. They wanted me gone. I am gone. But tomorrow, they will learn what it costs to erase me. I sipped the tea, its bitterness grounding me. The bedspread was thin, the air smelled faintly of bleach, but it felt more like home than the villa had in months. Because here, I was not a burden. Here, I was a woman with choices. I picked up the hotel pen and notepad and began to write a letter. "Dear David, Dear Elena. The words stalled. I crossed them out, started again, then folded the page and left it unfinished. Some letters are not meant to be sent. Some lessons must be lived, not explained. I slipped the letter beneath the teacup, switched off the lamp, and lay down. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Inside, I finally breathed without asking permission. The decision had been made. By dawn, the foundations of their dream would begin to crack. At the Hampton Inn, the hallway smelled like lemon cleaner. I set my small suitcase on the bed and unwrapped my chipped porcelain teacup from a scarf, placing it beside the electric kettle as if I were building an altar to sanity. The hairline crack ran like a pale river through white glaze. It had survived silent mornings. Tonight, I asked it to hold me steady while I decided who I would be by dawn. I boiled water and waited for the click. I took off Harold's ring and laid it on the desk. When he slid it onto my finger, he promised no miracles, only honesty and a roof that did not leak. I pressed the ring to my lips. The metal was cool and steady. I could hear him say my name the way he did when I doubted myself. The first sip of tea burned in a way I welcomed. I sat with the cup between my palms and listened to the hum of the air unit. Machines speak in small languages about danger and rest. This hum told me I had permission to be still. Outside, traffic washed along the road. In here, the only clock that mattered beat under my ribs. I opened the hotel notepad and wrote, "Dear David." The words looked formal, like a chart note. I added "Dear Elena" and stared at both lines. I had written messages to families in crisis, translating medicine into mercy. This message belonged to my family, and there was no translation soft enough to erase truth. I pictured two paths. Forgive them now. Rescue the wedding. Return to a house where I would always be a guest. Or hold the line. Let consequences teach what lectures never could. I imagined the first path. Elena would weep and call me an angel. David would look grateful and 12. For a few days, I would be invited everywhere, my chair pulled close. Then the next bill would arrive. The next joke about my teacup or thrift would cross a table. The guest room would remind me who I was allowed to be. Peace without respect is a pretty cloth hiding a cracked table. I imagined the second path. The reception would be canceled. My notice would land like a flat stone on a lake. Ripples would travel far. Yet beneath the noise, a different sound would begin, the click of responsibility arriving. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks that finally work. I rested Harold's ring in my palm and whispered, "If I do this, they will say I ruined everything. If I do not, I will keep losing myself." The ring offered no argument. It only waited, solid as the promise it once represented. I remembered my mother in a hot kitchen, lifting the same chipped cup and telling me that some vessels look fragile yet last because someone learned how to carry them. I had held my son's fevers, my husband's failing breath, my own silence. I could hold this decision. I folded the unfinished letter and slid it under the teacup like tinder under kindling. I drew the curtains a hand's width and watched the parking lot below. A man in a blazer rubbed his eyes at a trunk. A woman walked a dog with a lighted collar. A family argued about snacks and laughed. Ordinary life continued without me. No one here knew me as a wallet. The anonymity soothed me. I was a woman with a keycard and a plan, not a shadow waiting for permission to exist. I set an alarm and placed the phone face down. The screen winked with messages I refused to read. The bedspread was thin. The pillow smelled of bleach. I lay back and breathed the way I taught patients after surgery, slow and low, counting to 4, letting the body relearn calm. When sleep came, it approached like a nurse stepping into a dark room. In the dream that found me, Harold stood in our brick kitchen in Norfolk. Sunlight ran across the counter in a stripe. He wiped his hands on a dish towel and nodded toward the maple in the yard. He said roots are beautiful until they lift the foundation. Then he took my hands and asked if I remembered how to stand firm without becoming hard. I told him I did. When I woke, the ring glowed in a seam of dawn. I washed my face in cool water and braided my hair the way I always did before long shifts. Routine steadied me. Each action said I belonged to myself. I checked the folder I had packed for Marjorie. Insurance records, transfers, a simple ledger tracking what I paid when. I was careful because careful is how you protect a life. The ledger taught me to admire proof. I brewed fresh tea and stood by the window while steam rose. Morning trucks sighed along the road. Somewhere, ovens warmed for a feast that would not be served. I did not feel cruel. I felt exact, the way a nurse feels when she charts a dose after checking the name twice. Exactness has a kind of mercy. It keeps you from fantasy and from vengeance. It points you toward the next step. I slipped Harold's ring back onto my finger, and the weight found its old place. I tucked the letter deeper under the teacup and cupped the china in both hands. The crack held. I whispered, "I will not send this yet." I wrapped the cup in its scarf, zipped the suitcase, and looked once around the room to make sure I had left nothing but a softened pillow and a clean sink. When I closed the door, the latch clicked with a decisive sound. The corridor smelled like lemon. My steps felt sure. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. I stepped in. I was no one's guest. I was the woman responsible for what would happen next. The hotel room was quiet except for the hum of the air unit. I had finally begun to rest when the phone on the nightstand rattled against the wood. The red digits on the clock glowed just past midnight. I let it ring until it stopped. Then it started again. My cell phone buzzed across the desk like a restless insect. I picked it up, saw David's name, and set it back down. Silence lasted only seconds before it rang again, then again, each time more frantic. Finally, I answered. Elena's voice shot through the line, shrill and sharp enough to pierce the walls. 240 guests, Sylvia. Do you understand what you've done? Everyone will think we are broke. Her words tumbled over one another, panicked and full of the vanity she guarded more fiercely than love. I listened, calm, letting her pour out her terror. When she paused for breath, I spoke evenly. No, Elena. They will not think you are broke. They will think you are careless. Her gasp crackled through the receiver. Careless? I am fighting for my reputation. You embarrassed us in front of the entire country club. I canceled a party, I said, not your wedding. You can still marry David in the morning. What you cannot do is spend my money while telling me to vanish. Her voice rose higher, like glass about to shatter. You are vindictive. You ruined our special day because you felt slighted. No, I said, and the calm in my tone startled even me. I'm teaching you that every action has a cost. You wanted me gone. Tonight, I am gone. And with me goes everything I was, willing to give. She screamed my name once more before the line went dead. A few minutes later, the phone rang again. This time it was David. His voice carried no fury, only weariness, like a man caught between two fires. Mom, please. Why are you doing this? Over a room? Over one misunderstanding? I closed my eyes. No, David. Not over a room. Over respect. He sighed, heavy and broken. You've been part of every plan, every step. Couldn't you have waited until after the wedding? Waited? I asked. I waited 3 years while you ignored every warning sign. I waited through bills, through insults, through being erased from my own sacrifice. Tonight, I stopped waiting. There was silence, the kind that reveals truth. He whispered, "Elena's crying in the bathroom. Her makeup is ruined. What am I supposed to tell her? Tell her that the woman she wanted to erase is no longer funding her dreams," I said. Tell her weddings can still happen without swan ice sculptures and champagne fountains. "Mom," he murmured, "you don't understand. This will destroy everything." I looked around the small hotel room, at the neat bed and the folded letter under my teacup. My chest rose with something steadier than anger. "David, if one canceled party can destroy everything, then everything you built was too fragile to begin with." He tried again, his tone pleading. "Can't we sit down tomorrow? Just talk like adults? You told me tomorrow was for your wedding." Tonight was my deadline, and I already acted. I heard him breathe hard through the line, a sound that carried both anger and regret. "I can't fix this if you won't bend." "Bend?" I repeated softly. I bent for years until I barely recognized myself. "I am standing now. You will have to learn what that feels like." The silence stretched so long that I thought he had hung up. Finally, he whispered, "I wish Dad were here. He would know what to do." I felt Harold's ring cold against my skin. "Your father taught me never to let anyone treat me small." Tonight, I honored him. The line clicked off. The phones finally fell silent. I sat on the edge of the bed, the hum of the air unit filling the space their voices had left. My body trembled, not with fear, but with release. I sipped from the chipped cup, now warm in my hands. Their world was unraveling in panic, but mine had never felt more whole. I whispered to the quiet, "Respect is not a gift you demand. It is a debt you owe." Then I turned off the lamp, slid beneath the stiff white sheets, and let the storm rage outside while I rested in peace. Morning light pushed through the thin curtains of my hotel room, painting the walls in pale yellow. My phone was heavy with missed calls and unread messages. I had turned the volume off during the night, but the vibrations left a steady trail of evidence across the nightstand. I brewed tea in my chipped cup, the steam rising, like a reminder that broken things can still hold warmth. At 9 o'clock, a knock rattled the door. I looked through the peephole. David stood in the hallway wearing a wrinkled tuxedo shirt, his bow tie undone, his face pale with exhaustion. His shoulders slumped as though he carried the weight of both his fiancée's fury and his own cowardice. I opened the door but did not invite him in. "You should be getting ready," I said. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Mom, please, we need to talk." "You have 240 guests waiting," I said evenly. "This isn't the time." "It is the only time," he said, pushing past me. I let him. Sometimes a person must enter the room to realize there is nothing there for them. He sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his hair. "She's locked herself in the bathroom. She's having a breakdown. Her mother's threatening to fly home. Everything is falling apart." I sipped my tea, letting the quiet stretch. "I'm sorry to hear that. But this is the life you both designed." He looked up sharply. "You destroyed our wedding." "No," I said calmly. "I removed my financial support." "There's a difference." His jaw worked as though he wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. "Over a fight about a room?" "Not about a room," I said. "About respect. Respect is the foundation of a family, David. Without it, everything collapses, even a wedding planned down to the last swan ice sculpture." He dropped his head into his hands. "You can't sell the villa. That's our home." "It's our home," I corrected. "I own 30%. If I vanish with my share." The words landed between us like a stone in water. He looked up, stunned. "You wouldn't." "I already did," I said. The paperwork is in motion. He blinked as if I had spoken in another language. Mom, we can't afford that. We don't have the money. Then you will learn to live within your means, I replied. That is what adulthood requires. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of the air unit. His hands shook. You've always helped us. Why now? Because help without gratitude turns into enablement. Because every dollar I gave was another brick in a wall you used to shut me out. Because I finally remembered that my life has value beyond writing checks. His voice cracked. She didn't mean it, what she said last night. Yes, she did, I said softly. And you agreed with her. That is what hurt the most. He stood then, pacing the narrow room, his tuxedo pants creased and dusty at the hem. We can fix this. Tell me what you want. Tell me how to make this right, I studied him. My boy, who once clutched my hand crossing the street, now begging me to repair the life he had chosen. I want you to understand that money cannot buy love, and silence cannot buy respect. You let both slip away, his eyes, filled with something close to shame. So you're just going to ruin us? No, I said. You ruined yourselves when you let her words stand, and when you let my sacrifices vanish into air. I am simply drawing the line where it should have been drawn years ago. For a moment, he looked like a child again, small and frightened. Then he straightened, bitterness hardening his features. This will follow us forever. People will talk, let them, I said. Better to be known for reclaiming dignity than for living as a shadow in your children's home. He had no answer. He moved to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. She'll never forgive you. I met his eyes. She'll learn to. Or she won't. Forgiveness is her lesson. Boundaries are mine. The door closed softly behind him. I stood in the quiet, Harold's ring heavy on my hand, the teacup warm between my palms. Outside, the day brightened, and with it came the sound of wedding bells that would ring hollow without a reception, without the illusion of endless money. They thought my disappearance would be simple. Instead, it became the beginning of their reckoning. After David left my hotel room, I sat in the stillness, sipping what was left of my tea. I thought the morning chaos would grant me a reprieve, but instead my phone lit up again. I nearly ignored it until I saw the caller ID. It wasn't David. It wasn't Elena. It was Margaret Howard, Elena's mother. I answered with caution. Mrs. Howard. Her voice was calm, measured in a way that reminded me of my own nursing days, when you spoke softly to steady a patient in shock. Sylvia, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I thought you should know what's happening on my end. I heard faint noise behind her, an airport lounge, perhaps. She explained she had flown in yesterday, expecting to be swept into wedding festivities. Instead, she had found her daughter barricaded in the bathroom, sobbing into her phone. Elena called me hysterical, Margaret said, begging me to wire money. She said you were threatening to sell the villa. I felt Harold's ring heavy on my finger. I'm not threatening. I've already begun. There was a pause. I expected outrage. Instead, I heard a long sigh. I told her she should be more concerned about her marriage than her reputation. She barely listened. She kept saying she couldn't lose face. Not in front of her friends, not in front of the country club crowd. I closed my eyes. So even now, with everything crumbling, she cares more about appearances than truth. Margaret's voice softened. She was raised to. Her father spoiled her from the beginning. When she totaled her car at 16, he hired the best lawyer to erase the charges. When she overspent in college, he bailed her out without question. I kept hoping marriage would give her grounding. Instead, she found a man willing to let her play the same games I swallowed hard. And I found myself enabling David just the same. The silence between us was heavy, almost companionable. For the first time, I felt a kinship with the woman I had viewed only as Elena's polished, distant mother. We had both played roles in shaping the entitled woman crying in that bathroom. Margaret spoke again, her tone clipped. This morning, she demanded I cover the buyout. She said I owed her that much. Do you know what I told her? Absolutely not. If she wants to own a home, she must first learn what respect costs. Her words startled me. They could have been mine. Margaret, I said quietly, you may be the first person she's ever heard say no. Perhaps, she admitted, but I fear it won't matter. She's convinced the world exists to cushion her fall. I thought of Harold's words, never let them treat you small. I wondered if Margaret had her own talisman, a phrase or an object that reminded her she was more than her daughter's safety net. She told me, Margaret continued, that you embarrassed her, that she'll never forgive you. But I've been watching her closely. What she truly fears isn't humiliation. It's the possibility that her actions finally have consequences. Her truth landed deep in my chest. For years, I had believed consequences were cruel, when in fact they were necessary. Without them, love rotted into dependency. I can't decide, I confessed. Part of me wants to let them struggle until they learn. Another part wonders if I should sell at less than market value just to give them a chance to stay afloat. And then there's the spiteful part, the part that wants to hold on forever, watching them squirm. Margaret chuckled dryly. You sound like me, Sylvia. I've debated for decades whether to save Elena or let her drown. I chose saving. It made her weak. Do not repeat my mistake. Her words stung because they carried the weight of lived truth. Before we ended the call, she said something that lingered with me, long after the line went dead. Sometimes the most loving act is not rescue. Sometimes love is the refusal to interfere. I set the phone down slowly. Across the small desk sat my chipped teacup, the folded letter tucked beneath it. Steam had long since faded, but the porcelain still held the scent of tea. I realized Margaret's refusal to wire money mirrored my own refusal to host their fantasy. Two mothers, standing in different states, drawing the same line for daughters and sons who had forgotten gratitude. I leaned back in the chair, staring at Harold's ring. For the first time since his death, I didn't feel entirely alone in the fight. There was another woman, flawed and tired, who finally understood that enabling destroys more than it preserves. The villa might still stand, its marble floors polished, its curtains drawn against prying eyes. But the illusion of invincibility was gone, and the cracks in their foundation had widened into something visible to all. I whispered to the silence. Perhaps this time, consequences will teach what kindness never could. I should have expected it. When spoiled children are cornered, they look for the nearest authority to shield them. By Monday morning, I received the notice. Elena and David had filed for a competency review, claiming I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. It was a cruel twist, one that stung deeper than their whispered insult. I had spent a lifetime making careful decisions, saving pennies from every paycheck, and now my own son suggested I was unfit to think clearly. I walked into the courthouse with my folder pressed to my chest. Inside were the documents Marjorie had prepared, the ledger of payments I had covered for them over 3 years, utilities, insurance, HOA fees, and those sudden emergencies that never ended. Every number was in my careful handwriting, each entry dated and cross-checked. Nurses know how to chart. It was a skill I had not lost. The court investigator greeted me in a small room, his expression kind but professional. He could not have been more than 40. He asked if I understood why I was there. Yes, I said steadily. My son and his fiancée believe setting boundaries means I have lost my mind. He tried to hide a smile, then gestured for me to begin. I spread the ledger across the table. Here is $150,000 in household bills I paid on their behalf. Not gifts, not indulgences. Necessities they could not cover because their lifestyle exceeded their income. He examined the pages carefully, nodding at the precision. You kept detailed records. I always have, I replied. Patients depended on me to note every dose and symptom. Now I use the same care with my own life. I pulled out the deed documents Marjorie had sent me. This shows my 30% ownership in the villa. It was not a gift. It was an investment secured in writing. I may be many things, sir, but incompetent is not one of them. He asked about my daily routine, perhaps searching for cracks in my memory. I answered plainly. I managed my medications, drove myself to appointments, handled my own finances. I told him about the community book club where I volunteered, the walking trail I plan to join next spring. My life was not shrinking. It was unfolding. Then I did something I had not planned. I pulled my phone from my purse and pressed play on Harold's old voicemail. His voice filled the room, raspy but firm. Remember, Syl, never let them treat you small. The investigator looked at me, startled. That's your husband? I nodded. The man who trusted me with our life together. The man who believed I could carry on with dignity. His voice still steadies me when mine shakes. There was silence, heavy and thoughtful. Finally, he closed the folder and met my eyes. Mrs. Carter, you are more than competent. You are careful. That is a distinction worth noting. Relief did not come with cheers. It came with a quiet warmth, like the steam rising from my chipped teacup. My children's accusations had failed, but more importantly, the truth had been spoken aloud by someone who saw me clearly. When I left the courthouse, the sky was gray with the threat of rain. My phone buzzed with new messages, each one a demand disguised as concern. I ignored them. I walked to my car, slid Harold's ring around my finger once more, and whispered, "We are not small." For years, I had wondered whether my silence made me weak. That morning, I discovered it had made me precise. And now the law itself had affirmed what I already knew. I was not losing my mind. I was reclaiming it. Marjorie's conference room smelled of lemon oil and paper. I arrived early with my folder and my calm. Harold's ring pressed against my skin. I turned it with my thumb and reminded myself why I was here. I was not there to punish a wedding. I was there to protect a lifetime. David and Elena arrived late. Elena's eyes were puffy. David studied the carpet. Marjorie stood, shook their hands, and sat with a legal pad balanced on her knee. "Thank you for coming," she said. "We need clarity, not chaos. Mrs. Carter has documents and a proposal." "It is a misunderstanding," Elena began. "It is a boundary," I said. I placed deed copies on the table. "I own 30%. The court investigator found me competent this morning. I am exercising rights that have been valid since closing." "We never saw that," David muttered. "You would have if you had returned the acknowledgments," Marjorie said. "They were sent multiple times." Elena wrapped a strand of hair around her finger. "There must be a way to fix this without tearing us apart." "Family is not a word used only when you need money," I said. "Family is respect when no one is watching." I slid a second packet forward. "This ledger covers 3 years of bills I paid. Utilities, insurance, HOA, repairs. $150,000. Documented. We were going to pay you back," David said weakly. "You never once offered a plan," I answered. Marjorie nodded toward me. "Please outline your proposal." Fair market value of my equity is between 180 and 200,000 after accounting for the mortgage, I said. I will accept 120,000 for a full buyout. It is a discount. It is also conditional, hope lit Elena's face. What conditions? First, Elena obtains employment within 60 days and maintains employment for 2 years. Part-time at first, full-time by day 60. Second, the SUV is sold within 30 days. Proceeds go to debt. Third, a written budget with no restaurant spending and no discretionary shopping for 2 years. All subscriptions audited. Fourth, monthly financial check-ins with Marjorie for 24 months. Bank statements, pay, stubs, credit reports. Fifth, no new debt without prior approval during the term David swallowed. That sounds like probation. It sounds like adulthood, I said. It is the structure you did not build. What if I refuse to share bank statements? Elena asked. Then the offer is withdrawn, I said. We list the house and sell. I am comfortable with either outcome. Can she force a sale? David asked Marjorie. Yes, she said. A co-owner can petition the court. It is unpleasant. It is lawful. Elena pressed her palms flat on the table. We are family. Exactly, I said. And family means respect. Respect looks like paying your debts, not posting photos of marble counters purchased with someone else's savings. Respect looks like apologizing before you call the police to question my mind. Respect looks like never asking a woman to vanish from the family her hands built. Color drained from David's face. Mom, please. I softened my voice. I did not soften the terms. This is mercy with a spine. I could insist on full value and petition today. Instead, I am offering a path that keeps a roof over your heads while teaching you to live under it. You talk about mercy while holding a knife, Elena said. Boundaries cut away rot, I said. That is how healing begins. Marjorie wrote, then read aloud. Buyout at 120 with conditions. Compliance monitored monthly. Default triggers demand for the balance or initiation of sale. No new credit lines or loans without prior approval. Attorney's fees to the violator. David blew out a breath. How are we supposed to live like that? By cooking at home, I said. By canceling memberships you use twice a month. By admitting your income is $8,000 while your lifestyle pretends it is $12,000. Math is not an insult. It is a map. Elena stared. You have changed. I have remembered, I said. Marjorie began drafting. The room filled with the scratch of her pen. David and Elena whispered at the window. I did not try to hear. They returned. Elena's jaw was set. I will not sell my car. I need it for appearances. You need it for appearances you cannot afford, I said. The payment could feed you for a month. This is not a suggestion. David tried a different angle. What if we pay you more over longer time? 130 over 5 years. No, I said. 120 within 90 days of signing. If you cannot secure funds, listing begins on day 91. Seek a bank if a bank believes you. I will not be your bank. Our credit will suffer, Elena said. Our standing will suffer. Your credit is already terrible. Time to face it without my bailouts, I said. David rubbed his forehead. What about holidays? What about seeing you? You are not being punished with exile, I said. When you treat me like a mother rather than a wallet, you will find my door open. It will not revolve for emergencies. Elena's eyes filled. I am sorry for what I said that night. Thank you, I said. An apology is a beginning. It is not a currency. Marjorie slid a printed draft across the table. Read and sign if acceptable. I read every line. The default language was clear. The audit schedule precise. I added one clause about attorney's fees. Marjorie approved. David signed first. His signature wavered. Elena hesitated, then signed with a flourish. Marjorie notarized. The stamp sounded small and decisive. The air changed. The legal part was finished. The human part remained. Elena spoke. "Will you come to dinner when this ends?" "Not yet," I said. "Lunch in a public place first. Baby steps." She nodded. David stood and hugged me. I allowed it. I did not let him mistake it for surrender. "Thank you for not giving up on us," he whispered. "I am not giving up," I said. "I am handing responsibility back to its owners." They left with their copy. Marjorie leaned back and studied me. "This is either generous or cruel," she said. "I cannot decide which." "Maybe both," I answered. "Maybe that is what justice looks like when love refuses to disappear." I gathered my folder. The letter I had started at the hotel lay behind the ledger. I slid it out and read the first lines. "Dear David, dear Elena, should I save you or let you swim?" I returned it to the folder without adding a period. In the hallway, Harold's ring steadied me. Outside, the sky was hard and blue. I pictured the villa not as a trophy, but as a mirror. It reflected the best and worst of what we had become. Today, I turned it a few degrees so the light struck differently, not to blind, but to reveal. At the curb, a young couple wrestled a stroller. They laughed and solved it together. I wanted that for my son and the woman he chose, even if they learned it under a weight they had never carried. I unlocked my car and sat with my hands on the wheel. My life did not end at a law office table. It moved forward. Dinner would be simple. Tea would be hot. The trail behind my building would wait. I intended to walk it until my breath found a rhythm that felt like prayer. I would keep walking until dusk. Steady steps, steady breath, a steady life reclaimed today fully. I drove away without checking my phone. The agreement would pull at them like a tide. Either they would learn to swim or the sale would come, and we would divide what the market allowed. Both outcomes were honest. Both were better than living small inside a house I had paid for while being told to vanish. At the light, I pressed the pedal. Harold's ring warmed against my skin. I did not need his voicemail to hear him. I heard myself. I was a woman who had replaced silence with structure, generosity with boundaries, hope with a plan. The future was not soft, but it was mine. 30 days after the agreement, I sat at my kitchen table in the senior apartment I had rented for myself, sipping tea from my chipped cup. The quiet hum of the refrigerator sounded steadier than the frantic calls that had once filled my nights. I had kept my promise. No rescues, no bailouts. And in that silence, reality began pressing hard against David and Elena. The first cracks appeared with the bills. Marjorie sent me a polite note. The HOA fee had arrived late, the check postmarked 3 days after the deadline. I pictured Elena writing it, her manicured hand shaking, unused to the simple act of balancing due dates. Then came the insurance payment. For years, I had quietly paid it online before they even noticed it was due. Now, without me, they missed the automatic withdrawal and received a penalty. David called once, leaving a voicemail that started, "Mom, just this once." I deleted it without listening to the rest. The SUV was next. They had listed it half-heartedly at first, asking too much. But car payments pile like bricks. After 3 weeks, they sold it at a loss. Elena cried to her mother, who later told me that she had reminded Elena that appearances cannot be driven to the grocery store. Job hunting wore her down. Elena walked into boutiques expecting to be handed a manager's role. She walked out insulted when asked for resumes. She tried interviews for receptionist positions, but stumbled when asked about experience. For the first time, she saw herself through another lens, not as a bride in a gown, but as a woman untested by work. David, meanwhile, stretched himself thin with overtime. He looked exhausted whenever we crossed paths in the courthouse hall for check-ins. His shirt collars sagged, and he spoke in clipped tones. Once he muttered, "We're trying," as though effort alone could pay a mortgage. I reminded him gently, "Trying doesn't cover interest rates. Results do." Their lifestyle shrank visibly. No more dinners at steakhouses, no more weekends away. Friends stopped calling when parties ended. Photographs of champagne glasses disappeared from Elena's social media. What remained were silent weeks, punctuated by my monthly reviews with Marjorie. The ledger told its own story. Groceries inflated, restaurant charges dwindled, clothing purchases vanished. Yet still the red lines outweighed the black. They had built a life like a balloon, impressive, floating, yet hollow inside. Now the air hissed out one bill at a time. I kept my distance, though part of me ached when I pictured David rubbing his forehead over numbers he barely understood. I had taught him multiplication at the kitchen table when he was a boy. Now he was 42, relearning arithmetic under harsher terms. One night, I received a message from Elena herself. Her voice was strained but lower, almost resigned. "Sylvia," she said, "I know you think we deserve this. Maybe we do. But it's harder than I thought. People look at me differently without the car, without the clothes. I feel like I've shrunk." I played the message twice, hearing beneath her pride a hint of humility. I didn't return the call. Some lessons must be lived, not comforted away. Still, I felt the tug of an old habit, to rescue, to explain, to soften the edges. I opened my desk drawer and found the unfinished letter I had written in the hotel weeks earlier. The first line still read, "Should I save you or let you swim?" I touched Harold's ring and whispered, "I will let them swim." The days grew colder, and with them, my resolve steadied. I walked the trail near my apartment, leaves crackling underfoot, lungs filling with clean air. Each step reminded me that dignity is maintained not only by saying yes, but by saying no at the right time. At our next review, Marjorie spread their documents across her desk like pieces of a puzzle missing half its corners. Elena sat rigid, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. David leaned forward, whispering numbers to himself. They had brought proof of bills paid, but also proof of the struggle. "This is unsustainable," Marjorie said plainly. Elena snapped, "We're doing our best." Marjorie adjusted her glasses. "Your best must change. Otherwise you will lose more than a car." I said nothing. It was not my role to scold anymore. It was my role to witness, to hold the line steady while they discovered how to stand without me. When the meeting ended, David glanced at me with eyes softer than before. "Mom, are you proud of us at all? For trying?" I held his gaze. I am proud when effort turns into growth, not before he nodded slowly, as if he had expected no less. Elena said nothing, only gathered her papers and clutched them like a shield. That night, back in my apartment, I poured tea into the chipped cup and read the ledger again. Their reality was no longer hidden beneath silk gowns and ice sculptures. Their reality was exposed, harsh and unadorned, and it was theirs to face. I whispered into the steam, "Harold, they are finally meeting the truth, and so am I." We met in Marjorie's office again, the blinds half open, winter light striping the conference table. David and Elena arrived with a grocery sack of envelopes. Marjorie greeted us, clicked her pen, and said what a nurse says in triage, "Let us see what we are dealing with." Elena pulled out a stack of statements, utilities, credit cards, streaming services. David opened the laptop and turned it toward us. A spreadsheet waited, cells glowing red where numbers had spilled over their borders. Start with income, Marjorie said. Then we will map expenses. David cleared his throat. Combined net is 8,000, after taxes and insurance. I nodded. Then the life you have built must fit inside that number, not the other way around. He typed 8,000 at the top. The total looked small. We are not children, Elena said. We can read numbers. Good, Marjorie replied, because numbers do not lie. We began with the mortgage, 2,400, non-negotiable, HOA, 340, insurance, 220. I watched the total crawl downward. Then came the line items that told the truth about habit disguised as necessity. Restaurants, I read, 500 a month. Elena bristled. We both work long days. Sometimes we are too tired to cook. You do not work yet, I said gently. And tired is cheaper at home. Clothing, Marjorie continued. 400. Elena sat straighter. I need to look presentable. For interviews, I said, you need humility and clean shoes. Those are free if you own a rag streaming, Marjorie said. 60. David shrugged. It is just a bundle. Everything comes together. Cancel the bundle, I said. Keep the library card. Marjorie tapped the next line. Gym membership, 120. I raised an eyebrow. Gym membership. You use it twice a month. Like my patience. Elena stared at her hands. We moved to the credit cards. Minimums totaled 800. A museum of vacations and impulsive buys. David's shoulders sagged as each card added its weight. We thought a home equity loan could wipe these out, he said. Borrowing against a house to erase shoes and steak dinners is not breathing, I said. It is holding your breath underwater and calling it swimming. He stared at the spreadsheet. Elena whispered, What do you want us to cut? Everything. I want you to cut pretending, I said. Pretending you can spend 12 when you make 8. Pretending appearances feed you. Marjorie took the laptop and created a second column, target budget. She typed as she spoke. Restaurants to 0 for 90 days, then 50 as a treat you earn, clothing to 50, only work items, streaming to 0, library and antenna, gym to 0, free classes online, credit cards, no new charges, snowball payments once the SUV proceeds clear. Elena's voice sharpened. We sold the SUV at a loss. The proceeds are smaller than we hoped. Loss is a teacher, I said. Listen. David rubbed his temple. If we follow this, we still barely make it. The margins are thin. Margins are supposed to be thin when you are paying for the past, I said. You did not arrive here in 1 month. You will not leave in 1 month. Marjorie added a final line. Employment. Elena. Deadline in 30 days now, because 60 has passed. Elena lifted her chin. I have applied to 3 offices. Apply to 30, I said. Answer phones, file charts, learn to stand in shoes that are not new. The room settled into a quiet rhythm. Calculator keys, paper sliding, reality sanding away excuses. I watched my son face numbers the way patients face a diagnosis. Frightened. Finally, willing. He looked up. Mom, if we follow this, will you be proud? When action replaces apology. Yes, I said. Until then, I am watchful. Elena tried again. Smaller now. What about holidays? Do we cancel even those celebrate with soup and candles? I said. Memory tastes better than debt. Marjorie printed the plan and handed copies to each of us. Sign that you have received it and agreed to the monitoring schedule. Elena hesitated. It feels like prison. It is a door with a lock, I said. You earned the lock. You also own the key. She signed. David signed. I added my initials at the margin. Acknowledgement without ownership. When the meeting ended, David lingered by the window. I keep thinking of Dad. He would fix this. I stood beside him. Your father told the truth. That is how he fixed things. Tell the truth about money, and you will have less of a mess to manage. In the hallway, Elena waited while David spoke to Marjorie. I hate being this person, she said. You will not always be this person, I said. But you must be her long enough to learn. She searched my face. Do you hate me? No, I said. I hate the way entitlement stole the best parts of you. Work will return them. If you let it, as they left, the grocery sack of envelopes looked lighter. I tucked my copy of the plan beside my ledger. On the street, winter air bit at my cheeks, sharp and clean. I walked to my car feeling something I had not allowed in months, cautious hope. Not because their numbers balanced, they did not, but because at last, the math told the truth. 3 mornings after the budget meeting, Marjorie called while I watered a fern on my balcony. Elena interviewed at a dental office, she said. Front desk, phones, and scheduling. They offered her part-time with a path to full-time if she shows up and learns. I thanked her, poured the last of the water into the pot, and watched the soil darken. Work is a medicine. Bitter at first, healing in time when taken as directed. I set the kettle to boil, placed my chipped cup beside Harold's ring, and allowed a small pulse of relief without mistaking it for rescue. By afternoon, a message arrived for the monitoring file, a photo of an onboarding packet and a training schedule, neat blocks highlighted in yellow. Start at 8, greet patients, verify insurance. My name was not in the message. I saw it only because Marjorie forwarded it to my ledger. Day 1 began before sunrise. I did not call or text. I brewed tea and imagined the clack of keys, the ring of phones, the smell of alcohol wipes. Late that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a short voicemail. Elena's voice was lower than usual, hoarse around the edges. I stood 8 hours. My back is fire. I got the lunch orders wrong twice. The dentist says I will learn. He was not unkind. I am so tired I want to cry. I did not. I am calling to document that I worked. Then she hung up. By the end of the first week, the check-ins turned practical. She practiced names, learned insurance codes like small foreign words, and apologized when she stumbled. The hygienists nodded and showed her again. She took the bus after selling the SUV and bought black sneakers with soles soft enough to forgive mistakes. She packed leftovers into a container instead of buying salads she could not afford. The budget line called restaurants had a 0 that did not move. On Friday, another message came. A photograph in the crooked light of a break room. A paper envelope with her name on it. A stub peeking out. Numbers small but honest. In the corner of the frame, part of her face, not posed. A surprised half smile, as if pride arrived before permission. I closed the image and did what the plan required. I filed the stub, noted the deposit date, and drew an arrow toward the credit card with the highest interest. The second week brought missteps. A patient arrived without insurance and raised his voice when told the policy had lapsed. Elena tried to soothe him and escalated the situation by offering to waive a fee she had no authority to waive. The office manager pulled her aside. The next day, she wrote a short note to the team. I saw it in the monitoring bundle. I spoke out of turn. I will follow procedures. Thank you for teaching me. I kept my boundary. When she called in the evening to report her hours, I listened. I did not advise. Once, she said, I never knew standing could hurt this much. My calves burn. My spine insists on being counted. I answered, drink water, stretch before bed. You will sleep better. It was the only nursing I allowed myself. On the 3rd Friday, a paycheck arrived by direct deposit. She forwarded the confirmation to Marjorie. I watched the numbers march from wages to debt as our snowball plan took its first bite. The balance shifted by inches. That is all it does at the beginning. Inches count. I wrote that in the margin of the ledger. David's messages changed, too. Instead of excuses, he sent photos of receipts clipped to a notebook. He learned to cook without complaint, and learned that a clean floor glows when you are the one who mopped it. He still sounded tired, but the whining fell away. "We ate at home 12 days in a row," he said. "It is strange. We talk more when we chop." I pictured them at the counter I had paid for, knives knocking softly, steam rising from a pot that owed no one a favor. One night, Elena left a different kind of voicemail. A woman came in scared. She chipped a front tooth before a job interview. I found her an earlier slot and called to confirm. She cried with relief. She said thank you and used my name. I have not been someone people thank in a long time. Her voice cracked. She caught it and steadied. I clocked out on time. I am going to bed. I carried the phone to the window and looked over the parking lot, where the same dog with the lighted collar made steady circles. Harold's ring cooled against my skin as if to say, "Careful. Hope is a good servant and a terrible master." I nodded. Pride without policy becomes permission. I had policy. At month's end, we met again at Marjorie's. The pile of envelopes was smaller, the spreadsheet cleaner. Elena looked different, not glamorous, solid. The sneakers made her shorter. The work made her taller. She laid 2 pay stubs on the table with a steadiness I recognized from discharge days at the hospital. David slid a cash envelope toward the column marked minimums plus snowball. No speeches, no sighs. "Progress," Marjorie said, tapping the numbers. "Thin margins. Real movement." Elena glanced at me. I wanted to quit the second day. I did not. The third day was worse. The 5th was better. I am beginning to see the shape of the job. It fits me when I stop pretending I am above it. "I am glad," I said. "Make your lunch tonight. Put your shoes by the door. Keep going." She nodded, not meek, resolved. Back home, I took the letter from my drawer and unfolded it to the first lines. "Should I save you or let you swim?" I added one sentence, careful and small. "You have begun to swim." I returned the paper to its place and poured tea. The crack in the cup stayed dry. The heat stayed where it belonged, inside, doing its work. Night settled over my small apartment like a quilt that had been washed thin. Soft, familiar, honest. I set Harold's ring on the table beside my chipped cup and opened the drawer where I kept the letter. The paper had softened at the folds from being handled more than read. I smoothed it flat with the back of my hand and saw the line I had written weeks ago. "Should I save you or let you swim?" Steam rose from the kettle. I poured water and watched the crack in the porcelain accept the heat without leaking. I have learned to trust what looks fragile. It is often what endures. I pulled my chair closer to the window. Down in the parking lot, a woman walked a small dog in slow circles. Headlights stitched white lines across the asphalt and disappeared. Inside, the only sound was the soft tick of the kitchen clock, steady, impartial. Elena's pay stubs sat clipped to the month's packet in my folder. They were not impressive. They were real. The first week she had misfiled charts and cried in the restroom. By the third, she had adjusted schedules and apologized in writing. David had sent a photograph of a simple dinner. Beans, rice, onions browned in the pan. He had captioned it with no commentary, only a date. Not performance, proof. I traced the sentence on the letter with my fingertip. There is a temptation older than pride, the wish to be the hero of your own family. I had worn that cape for years and called it love. Love that rescues before learning begins hardens into permission. I breathed in the tea, bitterness warming my lungs, and asked myself again whether mercy meant stepping back rather than stepping in. Harold's voice did not visit tonight. I heard my own. The court investigator had called me careful, not controlling, careful. The word fit like a garment tailored late in life, and surprisingly right. Careful people document. Careful people make plans. Careful people stop allowing emergencies to define the household. That is not cruelty. It is stewardship. I thought about my mother lifting this same cup at a table scarred by years of meals and arguments. She used to say heat reveals structure. A pot holds or fails when the water boils. Our family had boiled. The structure that remained was thinner than we believed and stronger than I feared. It held because boundaries held. Elena's job schedule was a boundary. David's notebook of receipts was a boundary. My refusal to fund chaos was the lock on the door. I read the first paragraph aloud, then folded the paper halfway, then again. The words no longer sounded like a question. They sounded like record-keeping. Tonight, the answer was simple. I will let you swim. I will not turn away if you drown. I will stand on the shore and shout the route to safety. But I will not wade in and hand you my breath. A siren wailed in the distance and then faded. The dog finished its circle. Somewhere, a television clicked off. I rinsed the cup, dried it with the towel, and considered the strange quiet of a life no longer lived as a supporting character in someone else's dream. Grief still visited. It came without drama now. I set a second place in my mind for Harold, and thanked him for teaching me the difference between hardness and resolve. I opened the ledger and marked today's date. I wrote one sentence beneath the totals: progress thin, integrity thick. Then I closed the cover. Numbers were only half the truth. The other half was posture. Elena now stood when spoken to at work. David listened without bristling when a cashier corrected him. Those are small muscles growing. They will tire, they will strengthen. The apartment settled deeper into night. I turned off the overhead light and left the lamp burning low. In that gentler circle, I slipped the folded letter into the hollow of the cup. A nest for something that was finally done asking. I placed Harold's ring on top for a moment. The metal warmed, the paper held. I whispered a short prayer, because old habits comfort. Harold, keep me calm. Let courage stay quiet. Let justice stay kind. I put the ring back on my finger and felt it find its rightful weight. Then I carried the cup to the shelf and set it between a library book and a small plant that refuses to do anything quickly. Beginning again is not a sprint. It is a series of honest nights like this one, steady, undramatic, faithful to the shape of a woman remembering her worth. I turned off the lamp and let sleep come like a careful nurse again. 9 months later, the maple outside my building had leafed and shed again, and I had learned the names of women who walk at dawn. I was lacing my shoes at the door when the phone rang. Elena's voice was careful and bright in a way that did not ask for applause. They promoted me, she said. Assistant manager, scheduling, supplies, patient flow. I earned it. I sat on the bench by the threshold and tightened the second lace. Congratulations, I said. How does it feel? Hard and good, she answered. My feet still ache. I like making the day run, a pause. I wanted to bring you dinner. I baked lasagna last night, my own sauce, not from a jar. Can I stop by? I reached for Harold's ring and turned it once. My chipped cup waited on the shelf. The letter rested inside it like a folded bird. I pictured Elena at her counter, tasting and adjusting, learning to season by feel. Thank you, I said. That is kind. Not tonight. I have a short trail with the group. We start at 5. Oh, she said, and I heard disappointment steady itself into acceptance. Another time, then. Another time, I said. Pick a Saturday. We can meet at the park and eat on a bench. She laughed softly. I will pack napkins and not forget forks. Then her voice shifted, smaller and honest. I was cruel to you. Working made me see it. I'm sorry I tightened the knot and checked the door latch. Thank you for saying it, I said. Keep showing me with your days. I will, she said. Good hike. After the call, I stood at the threshold and breathed the hallway's clean lemon air. Shoes snug, ring warm, keys in my pocket. I locked the door and felt the click settle like a period at the end of a sentence. Outside, the late afternoon light lay flat across the parking lot. A woman untangled a dog leash. A child learned to balance on a scooter. I lifted my face to the breeze and started down the stairs, one careful step, then another. Beginning again is measured in small turns. A promotion earned, a meal offered, a lace pulled tight, a door locking behind you as you move toward your own life. I joined the group at the trailhead, lungs ready, heart steady, for 12. The month after Elena's promotion, my phone learned a new rhythm, small pings instead of sirens. Margaret Howard texted first at dawn. Thank you for not saving her. Thanks to you, she is learning to stand. I read it twice, then set the phone face down and let the words do their quiet work. Marjorie's emails arrived on schedule. Bank statements attached, pay stubs verified. A neat note in the footer that read, compliant this month. David's notebook shifted from panic scribbles to tidy columns. He sent a photo of beans simmering next to rice. The caption said, Tuesday. I wrote the date in my ledger and underlined it once. At the office, Elena learned the inventory system. She caught a back order before the shelves went bare. She arranged a swap with a clinic across town. She reported the correction without flourish. Another day, she diffused a late afternoon waiting room by moving a nervous teenager ahead of an inked slot. She documented the exception and apologized to the next patient. In the monitoring packet, I saw her signature settle. It looked less like decoration, more like responsibility. Margaret sent a second text at week's end. I took her to coffee. She ordered plain toast, no photos, no performance. I typed back a simple, thank you. Restraint belongs to more than budgets. At night, I walked the loop behind my building. I passed the same porch where a neighbor tuned a guitar. I breathed the resin scent of pines after sun. When I returned, I placed Harold's ring on the table next to my chipped cup and unlocked my phone. Another message waited from Margaret. She told me she was wrong. I told her I was too. We cried and did not use it for anything. I smiled, then let the screen go dark. On the first of the month, Marjorie's report arrived early. Restaurant line at 0, clothing at 50, streaming at 0. Snowball paid as agreed. I poured tea and wrote a single sentence beside the totals. Thin margin, thick backbone. The steam rose and fogged my glasses. I cleaned them with a corner of the towel Harold once used to dry plates. I opened the drawer and took out my letter. The fold had softened. The paper felt like cloth. I did not read the first lines. I carried the phone to the window and found the voicemail that had steadied me for years. Harold's voice filled the room. Remember, Syl. Never let them. I stopped the tape and let the quiet widen. I finished his sentence in my own voice. Treat you small. I slid the phone away and listened to the ordinary evening. A dog collar blinked once at the curb. A bus sighed. Someone laughed as a door opened. I slipped the ring back on and felt it choose its old place. I was not waiting for permission anymore. I was keeping the promise myself. Calm, steady, onward. Elena asked to meet at a small diner 2 blocks from the clinic. Formica tables. Coffee that smelled like mornings. I arrived early and chose a booth by the window so the light would do most of the talking. When she walked in, she was not the bride from the glossy photos. She was a woman in black sneakers and a cardigan that had seen the inside of a laundry room. She sat down and folded her hands. No ring flash, no performance. I was cruel to you, she began. I said things I cannot justify. Working made me see it. Every patient is someone's mother. I wanted to tell you that to your face I watched her. The silence was not punishment, only space. Thank you, I said. Accountability is the first kindness. The second is consistency. She nodded. I am learning consistency the way I learned the new software. Badly at first, then better. I do not expect you to forget. I would like a chance to prove myself. The waitress poured coffee. The cups rattled against the saucers. We ordered eggs and toast. Simple food keeps expectations honest and voices calm today. Elena wrapped her fingers around the mug. Your boundaries saved me. I hated them and then I needed them. I let a small smile show. Boundaries are houses with doors and keys, not fences with barbed wire. Today the door is open. We will keep it on the chain. Baby steps, she said. Baby steps, I repeated. She took a breath. David is different at home. He plans the meals. He keeps receipts without being asked. Sometimes he looks embarrassed by the man he used to be. I am embarrassed too. Embarrassment that leads to new choices is useful, I said. Shame that keeps you frozen is not. Keep moving. The plates arrived. We ate like people who had worked through the morning, hungry without apology. Elena slid a small envelope across the table, a handwritten budget update, 2 pay stubs, a list of bills with due dates. I know you will see these through Marjorie. I wanted to hand them to you myself. I read the top line, restaurants at 0, clothing at 50, snowball payment posted. Thank you, I said. I see the effort. She looked at me carefully. Will you come to dinner? Just us. Nothing fancy. Yes, after one more month of staying the course, I said. Lunches for now. Public places help us use our careful voices. She exhaled, relief rather than triumph. I can do that. We paid the check separately. Outside, the wind moved a paper flyer along the sidewalk. It bumped over the curb and sailed. Elena reached for a hug, then stopped. May I? You may, I said, and kept it brief. As we parted, I touched Harold's ring and felt the circle warm. Forgiveness, I thought, is not a light switch. It is a dimmer you raise one notch at a time. Steady, watchful, kind. Afternoon light draped the window of Maplewood Community when I poured tea into my chipped cup and sat by the sill. The short trail lay bright and empty, gravel shining like a thin river. I turned Harold's ring with my thumb and listened for the quiet I had earned. Once, I believed the best gift was to make myself smaller so others could stand taller. Now I know the gift was different. I stepped out of their house so I could step back into my life. From here I can see the town move in deliberate beats. A bus sighs, a boy kicks a ball, a nurse in blue scrubs crosses at the light. Elena texts updates instead of demands. David sends photos of dinners that steam without fanfare. I keep the ledger for the last stretch of their agreement, but the ink feels lighter. Boundaries did not break us. They bridged misremembered love to honest care. I lift the cup. Heat touches the crack and stops, held by glaze and history. I think of the girl Elena was, the boy David was, the woman I am. I think of Harold saying, "Never let them treat you small," and of my own voice finally finishing the sentence. I set the cup down and let the quiet speak. On the dresser sits a small row of keepsakes. A photo of the red brick house in Norfolk, a leaf from the maple pressed between wax paper, a program from a community hike at dawn. I live lighter now. One suitcase taught me how little I need. Yet nothing about this life feels less. It feels true. The silence on good days feels earned. When I visit the villa to review papers, I leave without the ache that used to follow me like a shadow. Before I say goodbye, I would love to know something. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you, and remember this. Sometimes the miracle does not knock on your door. It waits quietly until you are ready to open your heart. I stand, slide the ring into its faithful place, and fold the small letter back into the cup. The trail outside calls for an evening walk. I tie my laces, feel the steady weight of the key in my pocket, and turn toward the door. The best gift was never my disappearance. It was my return to myself. Take care, and I will see you in the next story.